I stood at my kitchen window on that bitter January morning in 2024, staring at what used to be my favorite hiking trail, now buried under 8 inches of fresh concrete that steamed in the freezing Colorado air like some kind of industrial graveyard. My name is Owen Vaughn, and I had lived in the Pine Ridge community outside Boulder, Colorado for 7 years without any major issues until Sharon Pemberton became the HOA president 6 months ago. Sharon was one of those women who treated neighborhood management like a personal crusade, complete with a blonde bob haircut that never moved and reading glasses on a pearl chain that she wielded like a weapon during board meetings. She had that particular tone of voice that could make a simple "good morning" sound like an accusation. The trail in question was not some random path through the woods. It was a legitimate county easement that ran along the back of our neighborhood, connecting to the larger Boulder County trail system. For decades, residents had used it for hiking, running, and mountain biking. The trail curved through a beautiful stretch of ponderosa pines and aspens with views of the Flatirons that made you remember why you paid Colorado's insane property prices in the first place. But Sharon had decided the trail was an eyesore and a liability for the HOA. Never mind that it was not actually HOA property. Never mind that the county had specific easement rights. Sharon wanted it gone, and what Sharon wanted, Sharon apparently thought she could take. I grabbed my phone and took probably 50 photos of the concrete disaster. The temperature was barely 19 degrees, and whoever had poured this concrete had done so in conditions that would make any legitimate contractor shake their head. You could already see cracks forming where the concrete met the frozen ground. The whole thing was going to be a crumbling mess within weeks, but that was not even my primary concern. My hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. I had hiked that trail 3 or 4 times a week since moving here. It was where I had processed my divorce, where I had trained for a half marathon, where I had walked my old dog Barkley in his final months before cancer took him last year. This was not just about property rights or legal technicalities. This was personal. I called my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 2 houses down, and used the trail even more than I did. He was a wildlife photographer who had captured incredible shots of foxes, elk, and even a mountain lion from various points along that path. "Marcus, have you looked outside?" I said when he answered. "I am looking at it right now," he said, his voice tight with anger. "I already called the county. They knew nothing about this. Owen, this is bad, really bad." "I'm going to the HOA office," I said. "You want to come?" "Give me 5 minutes." The Pine Ridge HOA office was located in a small building near the community center, a bland structure that matched Sharon's personality perfectly. Marcus and I walked in to find Sharon sitting behind her desk, looking remarkably pleased with herself. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan and had a mug that said, "HOA President, because someone has to care," in flowery script. "Sharon, what the hell did you do?" I did not bother with pleasantries. She looked up with that infuriating, calm expression. "Good morning, Owen. Marcus, I assume you are referring to the remediation work we completed yesterday evening." "Remediation work?" Marcus stepped forward. "You poured concrete over a county easement trail." "That is not remediation. That is destruction of public property." Sharon adjusted her glasses. "The trail was a constant source of complaints. Strangers walking through our neighborhood, litter, potential liability issues. The board voted to address the problem." "The board?" I pulled out my phone. "I am on the board, Sharon. We never voted on anything like this, and you cannot just pour concrete over county property." Her expression tightened slightly. "Emergency powers allow the president to take necessary action when the board cannot convene." I sent an email notification. "An email sent at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night is not proper notification," Marcus said. "And this is not an emergency. This is you abusing your authority." Sharon stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Gentlemen, I understand you are upset, but the decision has been made. The trail was attracting undesirable elements to our community. Just last week, I saw teenagers on bicycles." "Teenagers on bicycles," I repeated slowly. "That is your justification for destroying a public trail. Do you have any idea how much trouble you just brought down on this HOA? Are you threatening me, Owen?" Her voice went up an octave. "I am telling you that you just committed a crime," I said. "That trail is on county easement land. The HOA does not own it, cannot modify it, and certainly cannot bury it under concrete. When the county finds out about this, they are going to rain hell down on you and this HOA. I have consulted with our attorney, Sharon said primly. Everything was done within legal guidelines. Which attorney? Marcus asked. Because if they told you this was legal, they should be disbarred. I was already pulling up the Boulder County property records on my phone. Sharon, I am looking at the easement documentation right now. That trail is explicitly marked as a perpetual public easement granted to Boulder County in 1987. You cannot touch it, period. Sharon's face was starting to flush. We have rights as property owners. That trail runs directly behind HOA, maintained common areas. Running behind something does not give you ownership, I said. Look, I am going to give you one chance to make this right. Call whoever did this work and have them remove that concrete before the county finds out. It will be expensive, but not as expensive as what is coming if you do not fix this immediately. I will do no such thing, Sharon said. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. Marcus and I left the office. Outside, the temperature had dropped even further, and a light snow was beginning to fall. She is insane, Marcus said. What do we do? We call the county, I said, right now. I pulled up the Boulder County Parks and Open Space Department on my phone and dialed. After being transferred twice, I reached someone named Jennifer Holbrook, who identified herself as a trails coordinator. Ms. Holbrook, I need to report destruction of a county trail easement, I said. Her tone shifted immediately to professional concern. Can you give me the location? I provided the address and details. She put me on hold for a moment, and I could hear keyboard typing. I am pulling up the records now, she said. Yes, that is definitely a county easement trail. It is part of the North Boulder Trail network. What kind of destruction are we talking about? Someone poured concrete over approximately 400 feet of the trail, the entire section that runs through our neighborhood. There was a pause. I'm sorry, did you say someone poured concrete over the trail? Yes, last night apparently. The HOA president authorized it. The HOA president, her voice went flat. Sir, that is a criminal offense. That is destruction of county property. I need you to send me photos immediately, and I'm going to have someone out there today. I sent her the photos while still on the phone. I could hear her sharp intake of breath when they came through. This is unbelievable, she said. Okay, I'm escalating this right now. Do not let anyone do anything else to that area. We will have someone there within 2 hours. True to her word, a Boulder County vehicle pulled up 90 minutes later. 2 people got out, a man in his 50s with a county parks jacket and a younger woman with a camera and clipboard. I met them at the trailhead entrance where the concrete began. Owen Vaughn, the man asked, extending his hand. I'm Richard Torres, County Trails Manager. This is Amy Chen. No relation to your neighbor. She is our documentation specialist. We walked them to the concrete. Amy immediately started taking photos from every angle, while Richard just stood there, shaking his head. In 23 years of managing trails, I have never seen anything like this, Richard said. Who authorized this? The HOA president, Sharon Pemberton. She claims she has legal authority. She has no authority whatsoever, Richard said. This easement is ironclad. The county has maintained this trail since 1987. It connects to the Boulder Valley Ranch Trail System. It is part of our official trail map. This is not some informal path. This is documented infrastructure. Marcus had joined us, along with several other neighbors who had noticed the county vehicle. A small crowd was forming. What happens now? I asked. Richard pulled out his phone. Now I call the county attorney's office. This is going to result in legal action. At minimum, the HOA will be required to remove every bit of this concrete and restore the trail to its original condition. There will also likely be fines and potential criminal charges. Criminal charges? One of the neighbors asked. Destruction of county property is a criminal offense, Richard said. Depending on the circumstances and the dollar amount, it can be a misdemeanor or a felony. Given the extent of this damage and the fact that it was done deliberately by someone in a position of authority, I would not be surprised if the district attorney gets involved. Amy finished her photos and came over. I've got comprehensive documentation. The concrete is already cracking in multiple places because of the freeze. Whoever did this work did not even try to do it properly. Do you know which contractor did the work? Richard asked me. No idea. Sharon arranged it all herself. We will find out, Richard said. That contractor is going to have some explaining to do as well. Over the next few days, things escalated faster than I could have imagined. The county issued a formal cease and desist order to the HOA, demanding immediate restoration of the trail. Sharon incredibly refused. She sent a letter back claiming the HOA's property rights superseded the easement. The county responded by filing a lawsuit and obtaining an emergency injunction. A judge ordered the HOA to remove the concrete within 14 days or face daily fines of $1,000. Sharon called an emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed with angry residents. I got there early and claimed a seat in the front row. Marcus sat beside me, along with at least 40 other neighbors who were furious about what Sharon had done. Sharon stood at the front podium, flanked by two other board members who looked deeply uncomfortable. One was Patricia Greenfield, a retired schoolteacher who had been on the board for years. The other was Raymond Walsh, a software engineer who usually stayed quiet during meetings. I've called this meeting to discuss the recent unpleasantness regarding the trail remediation, Sharon began. Unpleasantness? Someone shouted from the back. You broke the law. Sharon's face tightened. I acted in the best interests of this community. That trail was a security concern. You acted without board approval, I said, standing up. I am a board member, Sharon. You never consulted me or anyone else. You sent a vague email at 11 p.m. on a Sunday and then hired contractors the next morning. That is not how this works. I used my emergency powers, Sharon said. There was no emergency, Patricia said quietly. She had been silent until now, but her voice cut through the room. Sharon, I have been on this board for 8 years. What you did was not only wrong, it was illegal. You have exposed this HOA to massive liability. We will fight the county in court, Sharon said. With what money? Raymond stood up. Sharon, do you have any idea what legal costs will be? We are a small HOA. Our budget is $70,000 a year. Fighting the county could cost us hundreds of thousands. We will have to levy special assessments on every homeowner here. That got the crowd going. People started shouting questions and accusations. The meeting devolved into chaos for several minutes until Patricia called for order. I am making a motion, Patricia said loudly. I move that Sharon Pemberton be removed as HOA president effective immediately for acting beyond her authority and exposing the association to legal liability. Second, Raymond said instantly. You cannot do this, Sharon said, her voice shaking. Yes, we can, Patricia said. Board members, we are voting now. All in favor? Patricia and Raymond raised their hands. I raised mine. The other two board members, who had been silent throughout, looked at each other and slowly raised theirs. The motion passes unanimously, Patricia said. Sharon, you are removed as president. Please surrender all HOA property, including keys, files, and access credentials. Sharon's face went through several shades of red. This is illegal. You're staging a coup. This is following HOA bylaws, Patricia said. Section 12, subsection 4. Board members can be removed for cause with a majority vote. What you did is absolutely cause. Now, please sit down or leave. Sharon grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Patricia took over the meeting. She was calm and efficient, explaining that the HOA would comply fully with the county's demands, would remove the concrete immediately, and would cooperate with any investigations. How much is this going to cost? Someone asked. We are getting estimates now, Patricia said. Removing concrete is expensive. Doing it in winter is even more expensive, and we will need to restore the trail surface properly afterward. We are looking at probably $30,000 to $40,000 minimum. The room erupted in groans and complaints. Will we have to pay for this? Another person asked. The HOA budget will cover some of it, Patricia said. But yes, we may need a special assessment. However, we are also exploring legal action against Sharon personally. She acted outside her authority, and she may be personally liable for the costs she incurred. That was some small comfort, but not much. Over the next week, Patricia worked quickly to find a contractor willing to remove the concrete. It was not easy. The weather was brutal, with temperatures barely getting above freezing during the day and plunging to single digits at night. Most contractors wanted to wait until spring. We do not have that luxury, Patricia told me when we met at a local coffee shop to discuss the situation. The county is breathing down our necks, and that judge was serious about the $1,000 a day fines. If we wait until spring, we will owe over $100,000 in fines alone. So what do? I found a contractor willing to do it, Daniels Construction out of Longmont. They specialize in emergency demolition work, but they are not cheap. How not cheap? $45,000, and that is just for removal. We will still need to restore the trail surface after, which will be another $10,000 or $15,000. I whistled low. $60,000 total? Approximately. The special assessment will be about $200 per household. People are going to be furious. They will be more furious if we have to pay $100,000 in fines, I said. The county agreed to extend the deadline by 1 week to allow for the contractor scheduling. Meanwhile, the county attorney's office was moving forward with criminal charges against Sharon. I got a call from a detective with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, a guy named Detective Morris, who wanted to interview me about what happened. We met at the station, a modern building off Highway 36. Detective Morris was a stocky guy in his 40s with a military-style haircut and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Vaughn, I'm investigating the destruction of the county trail. Can you walk me through what you know? I told him everything, from Sharon's complaints about the trail to the morning I discovered the concrete to the HOA meetings and her removal as president. Did Ms. Pemberton ever indicate why she wanted the trail closed? He asked. She said it was a security concern. She mentioned seeing teenagers on bikes, claimed there was litter and that strangers were walking through the neighborhood. Was any of that true? I mean, people did use the trail. That was the point. It was a public trail. As for litter, I never saw any. The trail was always clean. Sharon just did not like the idea of the public having access to anything near her property. Detective Morris made notes. We have confirmed that she hired Canyon Ridge contractors to do the work. They are a small outfit out of Broomfield. The owner claims Ms. Pemberton told him she had full authority to modify the trail and that it was on HOA property. She lied to them. Appears that way. We are still investigating whether the contractor should have done more due diligence, but the primary responsibility lies with Ms. Pemberton. What kind of charges is she looking at? At minimum, criminal mischief and destruction of property. Possibly fraud if we can prove she intentionally misrepresented the situation to the contractor. The dollar amount puts it in felony territory. She is looking at potential jail time. That was heavier than I expected. Jail time for pouring concrete? She caused over $60,000 in damages to public property, Detective Morris said. That is not a minor offense. Plus, she abused her position of authority in the HOA. Judges take that kind of thing seriously. The day the contractors arrived to remove the concrete was bitterly cold but clear. I took the day off work to watch. So did Marcus and about a dozen other neighbors. Daniels Construction showed up with 2 trucks, a jackhammer rig, a small excavator, and 5 workers bundled up like they were heading to Antarctica. The foreman, a tall guy named Steve Daniels, walked the site first, assessing the damage. "This is amateur hour," he said, shaking his head. "Whoever poured this did not prep the ground, did not account for the freeze, and used the wrong concrete mix for the temperature. It is already falling apart." "Is that good or bad for removal?" I asked. "Good for us, bad for whoever paid for it. This is going to come up easier than properly poured concrete, but it is still going to be loud and messy." The workers fired up the jackhammer, and the noise was incredible. Even with ear protection, the sound echoed through the valley. They started at one end of the concrete section and worked methodically, breaking the concrete into chunks that the excavator scooped up and loaded into a dump truck. It was satisfying to watch in a visceral way. Every chunk of concrete that came up felt like a small victory over Sharon's arrogance. Richard Torres from the county showed up around midday to check on progress. "Looking good," he said, surveying the work. "How long until it's all cleared?" 3 days probably, Steve Daniels said. "Weather permitting. If we get a big snow, we will have to pause." Keep me updated," Richard said. "The county wants this done as soon as possible." The work continued for 3 solid days. The sound of jackhammers became the neighborhood soundtrack. Some people complained about the noise, but most understood it was necessary. By the end of day 3, all the concrete was gone. The trail looked like a war zone, with torn-up ground and exposed dirt. but at least the concrete was gone. Now comes the restoration, Patricia told me. We need to regrade the trail, compact the surface, and lay down proper trail material. How long will that take? Another week, probably. But at least we met the deadline for concrete removal. No fines. Sharon, meanwhile, had lawyered up. She hired some attorney out of Denver who immediately started sending threatening letters to the HOA, claiming Sharon was being scapegoated and that the board had approved her actions. Patricia forwarded me one of the letters. It was full of legal bluster and accusations, but it did not change the facts. She is desperate, Patricia said. Her attorney is trying to muddy the waters, but we have documentation of everything. The email records show she never got proper board approval. The county has their own evidence. This is not going to go well for her. The criminal case moved forward. Sharon was formally charged with felony criminal mischief and misdemeanor fraud. Her arraignment was scheduled for early March. Meanwhile, the HOA moved forward with a civil lawsuit against Sharon to recover the costs of the concrete removal and trail restoration. We were seeking the full $62,000 plus legal fees. The special assessment notices went out to all homeowners in February. $220 per household to cover the immediate costs. People were not happy, but most understood that Sharon was the one at fault. A few homeowners tried to fight the assessment, claiming they should not have to pay for Sharon's mistakes. Patricia patiently explained that HOA funds were limited and that we were pursuing legal action against Sharon to recover the money, but in the meantime, the bills had to be paid. The trail restoration was completed in late February. A new contractor brought in proper trail-based material, graded everything correctly, and restored the path to even better condition than before. Richard Torres inspected it personally and declared it acceptable. Better than it was before, honestly, he said. That old trail surface was getting worn. This is solid work. The county formally closed their lawsuit against the HOA once the trail was restored. We still faced potential fines for the initial violation, but Richard went to bat for us, explaining to the county commissioners that the HOA had acted quickly to remove Sharon, had cooperated fully, and had restored the trail at considerable expense. The commissioners agreed to waive the fines given the circumstances. That was a huge relief. Sharon's criminal case went to trial in May. I was called as a witness along with Marcus, Patricia, and Richard Torres. The trial lasted 3 days. Sharon's attorney tried to argue that she had genuinely believed she had authority to modify the trail, that it was a good faith mistake rather than a criminal act. The prosecution demolished that argument by presenting the easement documents, the emails showing Sharon had never sought proper board approval, and testimony from the contractor that Sharon had misrepresented the situation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Sharon guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I attended, along with Patricia and several other neighbors. The courtroom was tense as the judge reviewed the case. "Ms. Pemberton," the judge said, looking down at Sharon over his glasses, "you abused a position of trust and authority. You deliberately destroyed public property because of your personal preferences. You lied to contractors and misled your own HOA board. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was arrogance and entitlement." Sharon was crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Her attorney put a hand on her shoulder. "Maat, I am sentencing you to 90 days in county jail, suspended pending completion of 2 years probation," the judge continued. "You will also perform 200 hours of community service, specifically with Boulder County Parks and open space, where you will assist with trail maintenance and restoration. Additionally, you will pay full restitution to the HOA in the amount of $62,000, plus restitution to Boulder County for their administrative and legal costs in the amount of $12,000. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sharon said quietly. "If you violate the terms of your probation, you will serve the full 90 days. Do not test me on this, Ms. Pemberton." The civil case settled shortly after the criminal sentencing. Sharon's attorney negotiated a payment plan where Sharon would pay the HOA $1,000 per month until the debt was cleared. It would take over 5 years, but at least we would get the money back eventually. Sharon moved out of Pine Ridge 2 months later. Her house went up for sale in July, and it sold within a week. I never saw her again. The trail, meanwhile, became more popular than ever. Word had spread about the conflict, and it became something of a local legend. People would specifically come to hike the trail that the crazy HOA president tried to destroy. Patricia remained HOA president for the next 2 years, and she was excellent at it, competent, fair, and actually interested in serving the community rather than controlling it. She instituted new policies requiring full board approval for any expenditure over $500 and requiring 30-day notice for any major decisions. I continued hiking the trail 3 or 4 times a week. Every time I walked it, I thought about that bitter January morning when I had looked out my window and seen 8 inches of concrete where the trail used to be. I thought about how quickly things had escalated, how Sharon's arrogance had cost her everything, and how close we had come to losing the trail permanently. One evening in late September, almost 2 years after the concrete incident, I was hiking the trail at sunset. The aspens were turning gold, and the air had that perfect autumn crispness that makes Colorado worth all its hassles. I reached my favorite viewpoint, where you could see the flatirons lit up by the setting sun. Marcus was already there with his camera, trying to catch a fox he had spotted earlier. "Did you get the shot?" I asked. "Not yet, but I will. Fox is around here somewhere." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the light fade over the mountains. "Remember when Sharon poured concrete over this whole trail?" Marcus said. "How could I forget? Seems like a lifetime ago. 2 years this January. You ever wonder if she learned anything from it?" Marcus asked. I thought about that. Sharon crying in court, Sharon being sentenced to trail maintenance duty, Sharon quietly selling her house and leaving the neighborhood. "I doubt it," I said. "People like Sharon do not learn. They just move on to the next place where they can try to control things." "Probably true." The fox appeared then, slipping out of the trees about 30 yards away. Marcus slowly raised his camera, moving with the patience of someone who had spent hundreds of hours photographing wildlife. The shutter clicked softly 3 times before the fox disappeared back into the forest. "Got it," Marcus said, grinning. We hiked back together as darkness fell, our headlamps cutting through the twilight. The trail was solid under our feet, properly maintained and restored. You could not even tell where the concrete had been anymore. Back at the trailhead, we ran into 2 teenagers on mountain bikes, clearly finishing an evening ride. "Trail conditions good?" one of them asked. "Perfect," I said. They rode off and Marcus laughed. Sharon would have lost her mind. "Teenagers on bicycles," I said in my best Sharon voice, "an absolute menace to society." Thank God she is gone. Amen to that. I walked home under a sky full of stars, grateful for trails that stayed open, for neighbors who stood up to bullies, and for a system that, however slowly and imperfectly, eventually held people accountable for their actions. The HOA functioned smoothly after that. Patricia's leadership set a tone of cooperation rather than control. Board meetings became boring again, which was exactly what they should be. We discussed paint colors and landscape maintenance and snow removal contracts. Normal, mundane HOA business. The special assessment was paid off within a year, thanks to careful budget management and the start of Sharon's restitution payments. By the second year, the HOA actually had a surplus, which we used to improve other common areas. One of those improvements was a new informational kiosk at the trailhead, installed in partnership with Boulder County. It included a map of the trail system, information about local wildlife, and a brief history of the trail network. There was no mention of Sharon or the concrete incident, though Patricia had jokingly suggested we should include it as a cautionary tale. "Future generations should know," she had said at a board meeting. "Or we could just let it fade into history," Raymond countered. "No need to advertise our mistakes." We voted to keep it simple and factual, just the trail map and wildlife information. Life in Pine Ridge returned to a comfortable routine. I got promoted at work, which meant more money, but also more stress. The trail became my decompression zone, the place where I could walk off the day's frustrations and remember that most problems were not actually that serious. I started dating someone in the fall of that second year, a woman named Rachel who worked as a physical therapist in Boulder. I introduced her to the trail on our 3rd date. "This is beautiful," she said as we hiked up toward the viewpoint. "How did I not know about this trail?" "It is kind of a hidden gem," I said, "or it was until a couple years ago. I told her the whole story as we hiked, the concrete, the HOA battle, the trial, everything. She listened with increasing disbelief. "That actually happened?" she asked. "Someone actually poured concrete over a public trail?" "Every word true." "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who thinks being HOA president makes them a dictator." Rachel shook her head. "I rent specifically to avoid HOA drama. Stories like this confirm I made the right choice." "Not all HOAs are bad," I said. "Ours is fine now. Patricia runs it like a normal person." "Still, too much potential for crazy." She had a point. We reached the viewpoint as the sun was setting. The flatirons glowed orange and purple in the fading light. Rachel took out her phone and snapped a few photos. "This spot right here," I said. "This is where Sharon wanted to block public access. She could not stand the idea of strangers enjoying this view. Some people have control issues. That is putting it mildly." We hiked back in the twilight, and I realized this was the first time I had shared the trail with someone I was dating since my divorce. It felt like a milestone, a sign that I was moving forward with my life. The following January marked 3 years since the concrete incident. The anniversary passed without fanfare, just another cold Colorado morning. I hiked the trail that day, partly out of habit and partly out of a sense of commemoration. The trail was covered in a couple inches of fresh snow, unmarked except for animal tracks. I followed it all the way to the viewpoint and stood there in the cold, thinking about everything that had happened. Sharon had destroyed something beautiful out of spite and arrogance. The community had fought back and won. The trail had been restored. Justice, however imperfect and slow, had been served. It was a good reminder that systems work when people are willing to stand up and fight for what is right. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Marcus trudging through the snow with his camera. "I had a feeling you would be here today," he said. "Could not miss the anniversary." 3 years. Crazy. We stood there together, two neighbors who had become friends through shared adversity, looking out at the mountains that had been here long before us and would be here long after. "You know what I realized?" Marcus said. "Sharon did us a favor in a weird way." "How do you figure?" "Before all this, I took the trail for granted. It was just there. But after fighting for it, after almost losing it, I appreciate it more. I come out here more often. I pay attention to it. I notice when things need maintenance, and I report it to the county. I have become a better steward of this place because Sharon tried to destroy it." I thought about that. He was right. I'd always liked the trail, but now I loved it. Now I felt protective of it. Now I understood that public spaces only remain public because people are willing to defend them. "That's a good way to look at it," I said. "Plus, we got Patricia as HOA president instead of Sharon. That alone makes the whole nightmare worth it." We hiked back together, our boots crunching in the snow. The neighborhood was quiet, smoke rising from chimneys, cars parked peacefully in driveways. Everything looked normal and calm, the way a neighborhood should look. That evening, I got an email from Patricia. The subject line read, "HOA Board Elections." I opened it to find that Patricia was stepping down as president. She and her husband were moving to New Mexico to be closer to their grandchildren. Elections would be held next month. I immediately called her. "You're leaving," I said when she answered. "Hello to you too, Owen. Yes, we are moving. It is time. The grandkids are growing up fast and we want to be part of their lives. I understand, but who is going to run the HOA? Someone will step up. Maybe you should consider it." "Me? No way. I do not have the patience for that," Patricia laughed. "You had patience enough to fight Sharon and see it through. You would be good at it." "I will think about it." "Do more than think. This community needs people who actually care about doing things right. You care, Owen. That matters." After we hung up, I sat with the idea. HOA president. It sounded terrible. It sounded like a massive time commitment and endless headaches. It sounded like exactly the kind of thing I did not want to do. But Patricia was right. Someone needed to do it. Someone who would not abuse the authority, who would listen to residents, who would remember that the job was about serving the community, not controlling it. I thought about Sharon and how she had viewed the HOA presidency as a platform for imposing her will. I thought about Patricia and how she had viewed it as a responsibility to serve. The difference between those two approaches was everything. The next morning, I called Marcus. I'm thinking about running for HOA president, I said. There was a pause. Are you serious? Maybe. Patricia is leaving. Someone needs to do it. That someone being you? I do not know. What do you think? I think you would be good at it. You are level-headed. You do not have an ego about this stuff. You actually listen to people. But it is a huge time commitment, and people will complain no matter what you do, and you will have to deal with paint color disputes and noise complaints and all sorts of petty nonsense. Sounds terrible? It is, but it is also important, especially after Sharon. We need someone who will do it right. Would you help me? If I run, would you be on the board? Marcus sighed. You're going to make me do this, or not you? I am asking, not making. Fine. Yes, if you run, I will join the board, but you are buying the beer at every meeting. Deal. I submitted my name for the election. 3 other people did as well. Raymond, who was already on the board, a newer resident named Jennifer Klein, who worked in nonprofit management, and a retired accountant named Thomas Alvarez, who had lived in Pine Ridge for over a decade. The election was held in February. All 4 candidates gave brief speeches at a community meeting. I kept mine simple. I talked about the importance of following proper procedures, being transparent with finances, and remembering that the HOA existed to serve the residents, not control them. I mentioned the trail incident only briefly, noting that it had taught us all lessons about the importance of checks and balances. Raymond gave a competent speech about fiscal responsibility. Jennifer talked about community building and neighborhood events. Thomas focused on long-term planning and infrastructure maintenance. The votes were counted the next day. I won with 42% of the vote. Jennifer came in second with 31%. Raymond and Thomas split the rest. Congratulations, Mr. President, Patricia said when she called with the results. You are going to do great. I hope so. You will. Just remember, stay transparent, stay humble, and do not pour concrete over any public trails. That is a pretty low bar. You would be surprised how many people fail to clear it. I took over as HOA president in March. My first board meeting was wonderfully boring. We discussed landscaping bids, reviewed the budget, and approved a minor update to the architectural guidelines. Nothing controversial, nothing dramatic, just responsible management of community resources. Marcus attended as a new board member, along with Jennifer, who had agreed to serve even though she lost the presidential election. Raymond stayed on as well. It was a good team, balanced and reasonable. Over the next several months, we implemented new policies based on what we had learned from the Sharon disaster. Any expenditure over $1,000 required full board approval. Any major decision required 30 days' notice to residents. Financial records would be published quarterly on the HOA website. Board meetings would be recorded, and minutes would be available to any resident who requested them. Transparency and accountability became our watchwords. It was not exciting, but it was effective. The trail remained my refuge through all of this. No matter how stressful work got, no matter how tedious HOA business became, I could always escape to the trail and find peace. Rachel and I got more serious. She moved in with me that summer, bringing her 2 cats and a surprising amount of books. She loved the trail as much as I did, and we fell into a routine of evening hikes together several times a week. I never thought I would say this, she told me one evening as we watched the sunset from the viewpoint, but I'm actually glad I live in an HOA community. Yours is pretty well run. That is because we learned from our mistakes. Sharon's mistakes, you mean? Fair point. Life continued its forward momentum. Work, home, HOA duties, time with Rachel, hikes on the trail. It was a good life, balanced and satisfying. One day in October, 4 years after the concrete incident, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from Sharon's attorney, informing me that Sharon had filed for bankruptcy. The restitution payments to the HOA would be discharged as part of her bankruptcy proceeding. I called Patricia, who had moved to New Mexico but stayed in touch. She declared bankruptcy, Patricia said. How much did we get back? About $18,000 out of the $62,000 she owed us. So we are out $44,000. Looks that way. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Well, at least she suffered some consequences. The criminal record, the probation, the community service, losing her home and having to move. It is not full restitution, but it is something. I guess. You okay, Owen? Yeah, I am okay. It just feels incomplete, like she got away with part of it. That is life sometimes. Justice is not always neat and complete. But the trail was restored. She was held accountable to some degree, and the community learned important lessons. That is worth something. She was right, of course. The trail was there, beautiful and accessible. The HOA was functioning well. The neighborhood was peaceful. Sharon was gone, living somewhere else with a criminal record and presumably fewer opportunities to terrorize her neighbors. It was not perfect, but it was enough. I told Rachel about the bankruptcy that evening over dinner. "How do you feel about it?" she asked, disappointed but not surprised. People like Sharon always find a way to avoid full accountability. "At least the trail is still there. That is what really mattered, right?" "Yeah, that is what mattered." We hiked the trail after dinner, even though it was getting dark. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to light the path. We walked in comfortable silence, our footsteps soft on the packed dirt. At the viewpoint, we stopped and looked out at the moonlit mountains. The flatirons were dark shapes against the starry sky. "Sharon tried to take this away," I said. "She almost succeeded. But she did not. You and Marcus and Patricia and everyone else stopped her. We got lucky. If the county had not responded so quickly, if the judge had not taken it seriously, if the jury had not convicted her, things could have turned out very differently. But they did not. You fought for something that mattered, and you won. That is worth celebrating." She was right. I was spending too much time focused on the incomplete justice of Sharon's bankruptcy, and not enough time appreciating what we had actually accomplished. "You are wise," I told Rachel. "I know. It is one of my best qualities." We hiked back under the moonlight, and I felt that sense of peace that the trail always gave me. Whatever else happened, whatever incomplete justice remained in the world, this place was here. This trail was open. This community space was protected. Sharon Pemberton had tried to take it away out of pettiness and arrogance. She had failed. The trail remained, and so did the lesson. Public spaces are worth fighting for, accountability matters, and community is stronger than any one person's ego. As HOA president, I made sure that lesson stayed front and center. Every decision we made, I asked myself, are we serving the community or trying to control it? Are we following proper procedures? Are we being transparent? Are we remembering that this authority is a responsibility, not a privilege? Most of the time, the answers were yes. Sometimes we made mistakes, but we corrected them quickly and openly. We never poured concrete over any public trails, which remained my personal standard for successful HOA leadership. Years passed. Rachel and I got married in a small ceremony at the viewpoint on the trail, with Marcus as my best man and the Flatirons as our backdrop. Patricia came back from New Mexico for the wedding, along with Raymond and several other neighbors who had been part of the fight against Sharon. "I am glad you won," Patricia told me at the reception. "The presidency, I mean. Thanks to you, you talked me into running. You would have done it anyway. You just needed a push." Maybe. She looked around at the gathered neighbors, at the community that had come together to celebrate. This is what an HOA should be, people who care about each other and their neighborhood. Sharon never understood that. She thought it was about power and control. But it is really about this. She gestured at the party, at the laughter and conversation. Community. "To community," I said, raising my glass. "To community," she echoed. The trail remained my constant through all the changes. Jobs changed, relationships evolved, people moved in and out of the neighborhood, but the trail stayed. Every season brought new beauty. The gold of aspens in autumn, the silence of snow in winter, the wild flowers of spring, the long light of summer evenings. Marcus continued photographing wildlife there, building an impressive portfolio that eventually got featured in Colorado Life magazine. The article mentioned the trail by name, which brought even more visitors. Some of the longtime residents complained about the increased traffic, but most recognized it as a sign of success. The trail was being used and appreciated. That was the point. I served 2 terms as HOA president, 4 years total, before stepping down to let Jennifer Klein take over. She was excellent, bringing fresh energy and new ideas while maintaining the principles of transparency and accountability we had established. Under my time as president, the HOA had no major scandals, no lawsuits, no dramatic confrontations. It was boring and functional, which was exactly what it should have been. On my last day as president, I hiked the trail alone at sunrise. It was early May, that perfect time in Colorado when winter has finally released its grip and everything is green and new. I stood at the viewpoint watching the sun come up over the plains to the east, the Flatirons glowing pink and gold behind me. I thought about that January morning 6 years ago when I had looked out my window and seen concrete where the trail should be. I thought about the anger and the fight and the eventual victory. Most of all, I thought about what the experience had taught me, that institutions only work when people are willing to defend them, that power without accountability corrupts, and the community requires constant care and attention. Sharon Pemberton had tried to destroy something beautiful because she could. We had stopped her because we cared enough to fight back. That simple truth had guided everything I did as HOA president. I walked back down the trail as the sun climbed higher, warming the cold morning air. Other hikers were starting to arrive, early morning exercisers and dog walkers and trail runners. The path was alive with activity, exactly as it should be. At the trailhead, I ran into a young couple I did not recognize, clearly new to the neighborhood. "Great trail," the man said. "We just moved here last month. This trail was one of the reasons we bought in this neighborhood." "It is a special place," I said. "Take care of it." "We will." I walked home feeling satisfied. The trail would be here long after I was gone, maintained and protected by future generations who might never know about Sharon Pemberton and her bucket of concrete. That was fine. They did not need to know the history to appreciate the present. Rachel was making coffee when I got home. "How was the sunrise?" she asked. "Perfect. The trail was beautiful." "It always is." She was right. The trail was always beautiful, regardless of season or weather or circumstance. It was a constant reminder that some things were worth fighting for, that nature persisted, and the community could triumph over individual ego when people worked together. Sharon Pemberton had taught us that lesson the hard way. I was grateful for the lesson, even if I wished we had not needed to learn it. The concrete was gone. The trail remained. That was enough.